that, I'll introduce Greg. I just met Greg just a week or so, the last week, because Greg came to me to discuss the idea of a new idea that he had. He's one of these guys, I get the feeling, that always has new ideas. And there's John, who's joined us as well. Greg, this is John Bookvar, one of my partners.
Hi, Greg. Thanks for joining us.
So Greg actually started off as a mechanical engineering and nuclear engineering student at MIT. He grew up actually in the New York area, and then went on from MIT to become essentially an entrepreneur. He right now is chairman of Coravin, which is this incredible wine preservation device. And he's also served as a vice president of product development and marketing for Stryker, and worked in their global orthopedic implant group. He's had a number of management positions, product development, marketing, business within Pfizer, and he directed and implemented processes for inventing and developing technologies that best met the needs of Pfizer's physician customers worldwide. In addition to his degrees from MIT, he has numerous patents all over the shop in healthcare and obviously in consumer products. He's a visiting lecturer at Stanford, where he's a founding advisor of the biodesign program. And he's also been faculty at MIT and Harvard's Joint Engineering Medical Physics program. He's also fluent in Japanese, which is, I think, his most interesting trait, and a distance runner. And for some reason enjoys drinking wine, which is not shocking to me. He's also been inducted into one of the most prestigious French and Portuguese awards for innovation. Well, he's won the Edison Award for innovation, but it's also a member of these sorts of innovative groups in France and Portugal. I can't pronounce the names of these. Maybe you could tell us what those mean. They're probably wine groups, right?
They are indeed.
Yeah.
No, it's,
I'll just shut up, because you're way smarter than me and have done a hell of a lot more. And I think the kids here in the group will really benefit from hearing of your journey and your vision. And maybe one of them will be involved with the joint medical engineering, medical physics program someday.
Yeah, I mean, my hope, and I've lived a life of innovation and entrepreneurship and developing products inside of big companies and in my own startup businesses. So that's really what I do. And it's been a great career. It's weird that it can be a career, an oddly stable career. You think of starting a startup business as a high risk endeavor, but it's maybe even more stable than when I was at Pfizer. So I'm here to try to convince you to come over to the dark side, skip out of medicine, and go and invent medical products. I've got a quick presentation.
All right, thanks, Greg. We'll see you. Take care.
Well, you can do both. You can do both. This message applies to people that are in med school as well, and go into practicing medicine. Invention is what you guys have easy access to because you're most aware of the unmet needs. And that's sort of the thesis of the presentation that I've got here. There'll be some blood and gore toward the end when I show a little bit of my spinal implant company, and there'll be some blood and gore when I pour a glass of wine. So if it's all right, I'm going to share a quick presentation. I'll walk through quickly. I'm staying around, so you can ask me questions certainly at the end. I teach disruptive innovation in medicine at Stanford and at Harvard, MIT, when they let me. And I've got some philosophies about what makes for the best innovation. So there's my Coravin wine product, there's Barricaid, my current medical device product. That is my background. MIT taught me how to think. Pfizer and Stryker taught me business of medicine and taught me medicine. I then took all that knowledge, left, and started my own businesses. I've had 4 companies, 3 of them medical, 1 of them consumer. I currently have 2, Intrinsic Barricaid and the Coravin device. But I've spent 25 years now in new product development, need finding, and invention. This is what I do for a living. I've been all over the body, cardiac valves and stents. I've worked on vascular access systems, spine, hip, knee trauma, urology. I mean, I could put up lots of pictures here. Body is infinitely fascinating. Everywhere you go, there's something complicated and nearly impossible to work on. And we haven't solved all the problems. I think that's a really important lesson. You can walk into a hospital and see people doing complicated surgeries that appear to have good outcomes, but trust me, we're nowhere near done with solutions in medicine. I got a couple of topics for today, probably too many. One quick slide on the difference between an inventor and an entrepreneur. I'm gonna speak a lot about unmet needs and needs being really the source of invention. And actually, the way you describe the unmet need is frequently the way you solve the problem. And so very few people spend enough time characterizing the problem they're trying to solve before they try to start solving the problem, particularly if you went to MIT, right? They're trying to teach you to solve problems all the time. It's really enormously important to characterize the need carefully before you start. And I'll speak a lot about that. And then I'll give you a couple of examples of the spine product and Coravin and how they both came from this process. So quick on inventors and entrepreneurs. Inventors solve problems through innovation. You see a problem, you fix it, you come up with an idea, and hopefully you make a prototype or something that implies that it'll actually work. The big difference between an inventor and an entrepreneur is bringing it to market. An entrepreneur wants to make sure that that invention changes the way the world works. You hire the core team, you raise money, you manage board investors, you establish a vision, you execute the plan. There's this belief that an inventor is sort of this creative guy who sits in a corner, and sometimes they are, but inventors like that need an entrepreneur to help them make that dream a reality. And it's remarkable the hard work that is necessary to make anything real. You hear a lot of people say, oh, I thought of that. And sure, I'm sure they did, but they didn't do it. Entrepreneurship is a career. Invention can be a pastime. And my goal as an entrepreneur is to improve the world. You want to change the way that things are done for the better and improve people's lives through the inventions that you bring to market. So where do they come from in medicine? Many people think that new inventions come from some sort of new technology. And that an assemblage of new technology is what makes inventions possible. That's not always the case. It's my strong belief that all inventions and great products come from a unique perspective on the problem itself, on the need itself. So if you think about it, when a patient comes to the hospital, they have a problem and they're seeking a solution, and they go into this sort of black box world of the therapy that's going to be applied to them. They don't necessarily know what it's going to be. And they get to the other side, they want to be a happy patient, right? And I think in medicine, we spend all of our time inside the hospital or inside the clinic or the point of care, surrounded by all these technologies solving problems. And we don't spend enough time thinking about the left and the right side of this slide, the problem that the patient had coming in and the outcome that they want. And really, my belief is everything in the middle can change. And the purpose of everything in the middle is to deliver the best possible outcome for that unmet need. Don't get stuck with what you see already in the therapy box. All that can change if the solution delivers a better outcome for the unmet need. So I worked on, I always believe in need statements. So characterize it formally. I post them on the wall of the company when I found it. So I had a way to replace the heart valve without stopping the heart, a way to repair a ruptured intervertebral disc that causes sciatica, actually was to reduce reoperation following the surgery to treat that, and a way to reduce the risk of prosthetic hip dislocation. These were all things that I wrote down that resulted in inventions, and that they guide the brainstorming process, they guide the way you think about the problem, they guide the way you understand the market for what you're doing. So this is an example. Normally, I actually use my own family as the place where I go to recognize where problems are. This is my mother. She'd had a disc herniation, which caused pain down her leg at the second to last disc, the L4-5 disc, which is here. I don't know if you can see my cursor. She had a discectomy on that level. A removal of the offending fragment that came out was compressing the dura and the nerve root, causing that pain. She then had another disc herniation at the level below, which is in this image. She had an operation on that. Both of them had recurrences. The stuff that was in the disc came out, compressed the nerve root again. She had 2 more operations. Her discs collapsed, which caused back pain. She had radiating leg pain. She had deformity. She then wound up having fusion. So she had a series of 5 operations from this first. And she went from being a very active woman to being unable to walk 100 meters. She picked up an opiate addiction, cardiac problems as a result of not exercising. It changed the trajectory of her life. So I recognized, okay, there's a problem hiding in here somewhere that needs to be addressed. So I'll go through the need statement and how it was built and what you can see. This is sciatica, a rupture in the disc in the spine, causes compression of a nerve, causes radiating symptoms down the compressed nerve. That's an image of a herniated disc on the right with a red circle. And it looks like this. If you cut the person through their belly, axially, you would see this. The nucleus on the inside of the disc ruptures through a hole in the annulus, compresses the nerve, and causes pain. It's a big problem. It's one of the top 10 procedures in the country, discectomy that affects young people of working age. There can be back pain that is caused by this as well as other problems at the disc level. Big healthcare expense. This is the discectomy. They go down, they make a 1-inch incision, grab the offending fragments, remove them, decompress the nerve, and you're done. There's still that hole left in the annulus. A little bit on the disc, you've got 25 of them from stem to stern, from the neck through the thoracic into the lumbar spine, the lower back. They're named by the bones above and below. So the lumbar 3 vertebra and the lumbar 4 vertebra, the disc between is L3-4, the disc between L4 and L5 is L4-5, and then L5-S1 is the bottom. It's the first radial tire, multiple layers of counterangulated fibers rooted into the bone above and below that hold this gelatinous chicken, ground chicken-like nucleus on the inside. It cushions the spine, and it also provides mobility. It generates an enormous amount of pressure, 23 atmospheres, 10 times your tire pressure. It's really a great radial tire. Every once in a while it blows out. The surgery, that discectomy procedure isn't without failure. It has a recurrence rate like my mother. People develop back pain like my mother. People drop their disc height. It collapses. That can cause other problems. There's pain from the disc that can come from tears. There are little nerves that innervate the outer structure of the disc. There's a chemical and a mechanical irritation. This is sticking a needle into a leaky disc and injecting dye, and you can see it's no longer a competent tire. People like this get fused, like my mother was fused. There's some pretty poor recovery outcomes from a patient perspective from fusion. There's really no recourse. Once you're fused. It can cause progressive back failure because now you're overloading the discs above and below. So when you see all of these problems, either in the clinic or in the operating room, the way you characterize them determines the way you try to solve them. And I like to think that the needs statement is the kernel of the innovation itself. So in seeing these surgeries, I wrote all of these things down. I was very careful not to try to solve the problem in the operating room, but I wrote down all of these different perspectives, literally 20 years ago. A way to restore annular competence. What if you could close the hole? A way to eliminate all of that painful nucleus, rip it all out without losing the height of the disc or the mobility of the disc. What if there was a way to eliminate all disc-related pain but retain all of its function? And then what if you could do all of this through percutaneously? You could stick a needle into the person's back and somehow magically cure their pain. So I wrote down all of these different things, and you can separately brainstorm solutions to each of these needs statements. And as a result, you'll get very different solutions. And interestingly, every one of these turned into companies. Annular closure. So if you could close the holes, you could potentially remove very little nucleus. You may be able to even put it back. You could restore the physiologic function of the disc to be able to generate pressure. It doesn't generate pressure when there's a hole in it. You could protect the nerves behind. Maybe you could even add nucleus back into the disc and jack the disc height back up. What if you were going to replace the nucleus with something that didn't hurt? You could rip out all of the nucleus and then put in an artificial nucleus that restored the disc height and its function, but didn't cause pain. So there were 35 different companies that did nuclear augmentation. What if you could replace the whole thing? We replace hips, we replace knees. You could replace the disc with an artificial disc in the lumbar spine and then get rid of all the pain generators, can't reherniate again, solve the problem that way. And then percutaneously. There are these little nerves in the outer structure of the annulus that hurt due to the tears and ruptures in this annulus. The nucleus is pressing against it with high pressure. what if you could burn those nerves using a little catheter that snaked around the disc and went to the back and sort of burned the nerves using heat, electricity, that basically worked like an old light bulb and heated up and cooked those nerves. And maybe it would shrink holes in the annulus and denature evil chemicals in the disc. So how you characterize the problem that you're looking at leads to very different solutions. And I'll speak to this at the end of the presentation, but it's really important to spend the time to write down multiple ways of viewing the problem itself, brainstorm the need and the need statements almost as much as you brainstorm your solutions. Try to understand what the problem is that you're seeing and characterize it as carefully as possible in the need statement. I always ask people, what do you think won? Which one of these things works? The annular closure, the artificial nucleus, the artificial disc, or this catheter that goes through. Everybody wants the catheter to work. It didn't. There's a placebo effect. Everybody wants the artificial disc to work. We're still trying. There are too many limitations on the patient population. There's problems with the joints at the back of the spine. There's loading that's really high and these things fail. So we haven't come up with an artificial lumbar disc yet that works really, really well. Nuclear prostheses all failed. Turns out if there's a hole in the annulus, putting in artificial nucleus, that stuff herniates just like the original nucleus. So that didn't work. And then annular closure, I have to say I'm deeply biased. That is my company, is Barricaid. And I'll go through it real quick. What we've done, this is a disc. If it's got disc height and there's a big hole in the annulus, we measure the size of the hole at the end of surgery. This is a patient at high risk of reherniating. The bigger the hole, the more nucleus left, the higher the risk of reherniating. We've got a bone anchored annular prosthesis. The bone anchor helps us resist this 350 pounds per square inch. We've got a Dacron mesh, which is actually a cardiac mesh, which is attached to that anchor. The anchor is titanium. It's driven into one of the neighboring vertebrae, holds that mesh in place. The mesh sits on the inner surface of the disc and resists expulsion of nucleus. It's placed at the end of a procedure where they decompress the nerve root. And this is one of our biomechanical tests. If any of you guys are budding engineers, this is 4 kilonewtons being applied to a cadaver spine in flexion. There's a needle measuring pressure from the front. It flexes as the spine moves to the left. And you can see the nucleus pushing the mesh back. There's some markers in the mesh. You can see the nucleus slamming against that occlusion component of the mesh and pushing it against the remaining annulus and the hole, and we're stopping the nucleus from coming out. That's the idea. It's a simple anchor and mesh combo with a delivery tool that's placed down against the back of the target vertebra and hammered in. It's a couple of different views of it. I'll show you a little surgery. This is where the blood comes in, so if you're squeamish, don't watch. This is a surgeon from Australia. We're used all over the world, Europe, Australia, Korea. It's a little bit of an animation. They make a 1-inch incision. They remove some bone to expose the spinal cord and nerve root, which are not shown in this image. This is a real surgery. He's operating through a tube. That's the dura covering the bottom of the spinal cord that you're seeing getting exposed. He's removing some bone from that lamina. This is operating through a 16-millimeter tube, which is a small tube from the back. You then go in and you remove the offending fragment of nucleus that's escaped, that is compressing the nerve roots. And then this is where our procedure begins. That's the normal procedure. We measure the hole, make sure that it's big, that patient's at high risk. We use video x-ray. We then have a trial that allows us to see if we can implant our anchor in the right spot, like so. And then we're gonna see it come down into this tube. This is our biggest size through a small tube. I normally advise against operating through these little tubes. And then this is our loaded delivery tool. You place the tip of the mesh into the hole and you tap with a hammer and you drive the anchor into the bone and the mesh into the disc space. This whole thing takes about 5 additional minutes at the end of a discectomy procedure, which is like 40 minutes long or so. So you'll see that here. The whole thing is countersunk into the vertebra, and so there's nothing in the epidural space, and that's it. Seems easy. Took me 20 years to prove that it worked. So if you're into medical device innovation, I hope you've got some time. Like pharmaceuticals, it it just takes time. So this is 2-year follow-ups on one of our patients. You can see the anchor in the bone, the X-ray, MRI, CT, different imaging modalities that are used to evaluate. Why did it take so long? We did a huge randomized trial, which is something that is really important in medicine, as I'm sure others will stress. We did a superiority study where we randomized in the operating room after the defect was measured and discectomy was performed. They randomized 1-to-1. Clinical trial science is really fascinating. Hire somebody who knows how to do it, or do it yourself and focus on it for your life, because it's a career as well. We did a 21-center study, 554 patients who were very kind to offer themselves up into our trial. They were randomized intraoperatively 1-to-1 by computer. Normally in spine, it's a 2-year endpoint. We followed all patients through 5 years. These big hole patients, if it's got a big hole in the annulus and there's a lot of nucleus left, their recurrence rate is really high. There's some good preceding literature that showed that up to 30% of our control patients had a reherniation. More nucleus came out within 3 years, reoperation 16%. Barricaid was found to be pretty dramatically beneficial, cutting the rates of symptomatic recurrence and reoperation. I always tell people you do a trial to prove that it works and to learn. We learned from the study and realized that when surgeons oversized our implant, the patients did even better. So then there were a bunch of single arm studies using that technique that showed even better results. So now we're commercial in something like 30 countries around the world, treating people every day. Just got FDA approval in the United States, so that's why I was in New York last week. So, okay, that's a need statement. I'm going to close holes in the annulus to try to reduce the rates of reoperation following discectomy. It works in consumer products as well. My first wine was Peju Winery. This is Tony Peju wagging his finger at me when he found out how young I was when I walked in to taste wine with him when I was 16. I do not advise this. Tony has become a good friend. It's a good California Cabernet. I love wine. And so in December of '98, I was 29 years old. I had 40 different bottles. They were given to me by surgeons that I developed products with. Many of them were too good to drink. I wanted to try them all, but I couldn't drink them the whole bottle. It's a lot of alcohol. And my wife was pregnant, so she was not drinking. So I wanted to be able to drink whatever I wanted to be able to drink without having to worry about the rest of the bottle. And I started writing down need statements on my kitchen table. And I was like, I need to find a way to extend the life of an open bottle. And I looked out there, and there's lots of technologies to extend the life of an open bottle. There's vacuums, there's spray cans, there's big machines that are expensive. And I was like, but that doesn't really solve my problem, because you're still drinking that one bottle until it's empty, because they don't last very long, these solutions. So I wrote down what I really wanted: a way to drink wine from any bottle I own, any day of the week, in any quantity I want, without the commitment that comes from pulling the cork. And when I wrote this down, I knew I had something truly innovative: a way to drink wine from the bottle without pulling the cork, without even ever opening it. If I could do that, if I could magically teleport wine into my glass, I could potentially come back and drink that bottle 5 years later. So this is the first night that I had a functioning product, and I tasted all of these wines. This is the second night. That is the third night. So I could taste a third of a glass or an eighth of a glass just to sample the wine and see what it was like, or I could serve them to friends. It changed the way that I drink wine. Also now changed the way that restaurants drink wine. And it came from one of the very first products I developed, which was a product for Johnson & Johnson, which is this protective peripheral IV catheter. I'd gotten really good at making needles that could go in and out of things without doing damage to them. So the need statement was critical. My knowledge of technology was what enabled me to solve it. That's the very first prototype. So I'm gonna show you real quick, because I don't have a video. I'm stopping sharing my screen. This is how it works. It's a thing, goes on top of the bottle. You press the needle through the cork. You tip the bottle.
Some of our students are underage, so they're gonna have to get off the.
Oh, okay, yeah, exactly. I'm pouring, I'm not drinking.
It's so awesome.
So I press the trigger, argon gas goes into the bottle. Argon is one of the noble gases, as you high school students know, all the way on the right-hand side of the periodic table. And you can push, there we go, push the wine out of the bottle into your glass without ever letting any air in, then pull the needle out, take it off. And because cork is elastic, it reseals.
I got a Magnum here.
Okay, it works. We'll taste that next.
It's Le Chateau Les Jouel Medoc 2009. Is that good?
That's very nice. 2009 was a badass year. Somebody, pardon my language, somebody nice gave that to me.
Bottle. Yeah.
This is a BB Rutherford 2015. So I'll go back to sharing real quick. Again, it was the way I characterized the need that enabled me to come up with a different perspective. It was actually an innovative perspective on the need that allowed me to solve the problem differently. These needles, these gases, the ability to control pressure, they've existed for hundreds of years, since the 1850s at least, but nobody had done it because they hadn't thought about the problem. It wasn't easy, right? That's a cross-section of the Coravin that I just used. I tried different needles, different gases. Helium was fun. We breathed it all. We did not, it does not work. It goes into the bottle and escapes really quickly. Tried different pressures, different grape varieties, different wine regions, different vintages.
What's the reason why argon worked so well?
Argon is it's the first noble gas heavier than oxygen. It is also the third most common gas in the air we breathe.
So what makes a noble gas? Explain that. I don't understand.
So a noble gas is, if you remember the periodic table, all the way on the right-hand side of the periodic table are a series of gases that have a full set of electrons. And so they don't want to bond to anything else. Helium, neon, xenon, argon, all these gases are what the Greeks called lazy gases. They don't want to interact with anybody. They have no smell, they have no taste, because they don't interact with anything. And so it's like putting sand into the glass, in the sense that it's non-reactive, or into the bottle. So argon,
that's so cool.
Yeah, high school chemistry matters.
I know. I've been away from it a little while. I can't
and pressures, right? The ideal pressure law. I had to remember that one. Grape varieties. I had to learn about wine, wine regions and styles. I had to contact.
That the gas just replaces the oxygen in the bottle.
The gas replaces the wine in the bottle. So you push the wine out. There's never any air that gets in. And when they bottle wine, they actually bottle it under either nitrogen or argon. So they spray inert gas into the bottle just before they fill it with wine, so there's no air.
There was no like FDA issue with a gas because they're already doing it that way. That's how they bottle wine.
That's it. And so I got to tell you, not having to go through FDA approval was one of the reasons I founded this company.
Yeah, that's why that's medical device. And the last question is, why is argon? Why would that choose to be the best one?
Interestingly, noble gases do not dissolve in fluids much. So nitrogen, carbon dioxide, everybody knows, right? It's carbonate your fluid. Nitrogen as well nitrogenates a beverage and dissolves in it.
Greg, I have to run up to the OR for 2 minutes. I'll be right back.
No worries. Good luck.
Be right back.
I'm sure it's important. So nitrogen dissolves in fluid. Guinness beer is nitrogenated. So anybody who drinks Guinness beer, those small bubbles are nitrogen. Argon doesn't dissolve in a fluid. It sits in the headspace, which is a good thing. So it took me 20 years to do this. It was actually 11 years of testing. My wife was pregnant with the guy second from the right. So I'm the fuzzy guy second from the left. So you can see I'm the shortest male in my family. It took me a long time, and I treated it, this is the advantage of being a medical guy, I treated it like a randomized trial. I did blind tasting with professionals around the world with all these different wines at different time points, the winemakers, the sommeliers who serve it in restaurants, to prove to them and to me that it worked. And the random chance that they would get it right was 5%. You can see here in the test that I had that it was equivalent to random, which was great. And it was done chemically. So again, it's good to be a scientist in the world of wine because there's very little science there. And actually, even in spine, there's not a lot of science in spine. When you bring science to bear, you really can prove things work. And when you prove things work, the hope is that you can improve patients' lives, you can improve people's lives at home and at restaurants where wines are now served by the glass using Coravin. So I'm going to end with 2 slides, then open it up for questions. If I can leave you with 2 thoughts. One is the way you shape the need shapes the way you think about the product solution that you develop. Spend the time to characterize the problem you're trying to solve carefully and keep doing it until, I mean, paper is cheap and computer is free. Write 10, 15, 20 different need statements, ways of describing it. And if you're in medicine, the need statement needs to have the patient population, the problem, and the desired outcome. A way to, right? Decrease reoperations in lumbar disc herniation patients. That's a very clear need statement you can brainstorm. The other way of doing it is practice. Look at the products around you and try to imagine the need statement they addressed. What is the problem statement that Amazon tried to address? Anything you want to buy in your home in a day, right? A way to get anything I want to buy into my home delivered in a day. Google Glass, I'm not sure what they were trying to solve. The original TiVo, right? I want to be able to watch on my schedule. I want to watch any show that's on any television channel whenever I want on my schedule and speed through whatever it is. Tesla, I want to be able to drive without consuming, I want to drive fast without consuming much carbon. These are need statements that shape the formation of the product and the company. And I find that if you're going to be an innovator and an inventor and an entrepreneur, it's good to look at the products around you and think, what was the need statement that led to this? What was the problem statement that these guys were trying to solve? I always say that the best products in the world are the purest reflection of the need that they're trying to address. And that's true in medicine, and it's true in consumer. It's true in every field that I've gone into. So spending your time understanding and characterizing that need is time well spent, and it's generally cheap. The expensive stuff is when you go off solving the wrong need, and you spend, $50 million, $100 million as a startup company trying to solve the wrong problem. So that's those are the two things. Look at the product around you, think of what need it's solving, and think first about the need before going off to solve the problem and innovate.
Greg, thanks so much. That was awesome. My name's Randy D'Amico, by the way. We haven't formally met. I'm one of the other neurosurgeons at Lenox Hill and course director for the Brain Turns program. So huge thanks for being on board. We're going to open it up so the students will interact now. These questions are going to come a mile a minute. So pick your favorite. We'll try to throw some interesting ones at you.
All right, let's see. Yeah, wine and spine. Yes, my career does rhyme.
Wine and spine. You know what? I got a quick question just to kick it off. Once you have your need statement, where do you start? Do you look at other companies first that have attempted to address this and where they failed? Or do you do a deep dive into the problem, into understanding every aspect of the problem? You presented with the disc issue, you presented, the PSI that a normal disc can handle. You looked at the anatomy, you presented all these things. Or did you start looking at these failed devices and be like, all right, what was the issue there? Or do you do it all simultaneously?
That's a really important question. How do you use your time? So I had a 3-month invention process where I spent 1 month in the hospital looking for problems, 1 month understanding those problems from a market size, prior competition, what devices have been tried, what surgical techniques have been tried, and then 1 month solving the problem. So I break it a third.
Yeah.
See the problem, write down the need statements, then spend a month characterizing those need statements, which was all the literature that had been written about the problem, getting into a cadaver lab, getting into surgeries again after I'd read all the literature, and looked at the market size, which is also really important. We're in a capitalist world. So if there's 2 different problem spaces where you want to work. Either very few people have it, but it's lethal, aortic stenosis, for example, in the aortic valve, or everybody has it, and it's pretty bad. Like there's lots of people and it's pretty bad. There are also companies that work on, there's lots and lots and lots of people and the problem is not that bad. Band-Aid, for example, Becton Dickinson with their needles, right? So I like to work in the upper right-hand quadrant. If you think about this as a quadrant, lots of people, big problem, diabetes, heart disease, spine problems, those are all up there. You have more competition, but you've got more latitude for success.
Yeah.
I try to understand every solution that has been tried. The one place that I don't look until after I've tried to solve the problem is intellectual property and patents. I find that looking at intellectual property stops me from being able to think creatively about the solution. So I brainstorm first, draw out all sorts of different problems or solutions, make prototypes of the best of them, show them to physicians, get feedback. Then I look at the IP and patents, and it's at that point where it's a moment of great sadness, right? You're like, oh crap, somebody's already thought of this and patented it. At Pfizer, we would just buy them, right? That was the advantage of being in a big company. In the startup business, you drop that one and hope you have another good idea.
Great.
Somebody asked, what do you do as technology evolves? So that needs statement that I wrote, a way to reduce reoperation following lumbar discectomy. What if somebody finds an injectable that they can inject into your arm and all of a sudden the compression of your nerve root goes away? I'll bring up a funny example, which is a little off color. Pfizer had one of the top penile prostheses implants, AMS, for people that had problems with sexual function. They also invented and developed Viagra. So now there's a pill that could address 80% of their prosthesis market. The reality is you are married to the need. You are not married to your current solution. So I always innovate. We are constant. Once you've invented and you develop the technology, you improve it over and over and over again and stay on top. If it's a good problem to solve with a good market and you're helping people, you don't just stop and walk away, you keep going.
Yeah, I think Dave Langer, I know he's upstairs, he's a great example of that. You know, he came up with this Playback Health, his mobile app. It's kind of like a social medicine app in a way to fix a problem of communicating with patients. And, you know, since its inception, I can't imagine how many permutations it's gone through. And also, you know, I think he would be the first one to drop it in you know, in search of a better concept or a better outcome for me. So
yeah, somebody asked another really good question. Could you please describe how you pick the material for the mesh and how long does that mesh last? I had 2 failed implant designs before we got to the one that we have. I tried not anchoring to the bone. And I tried this, I used to work in cardiac, and so in cardiac we have these expandable meshes. So I tried to make a nitinol self-expanding mesh covered in Gore-Tex. I was not paying enough attention to the violent place that the lumbar disc is. It's got enormous range of motion. It can collapse entirely and grind away on anything on the inside of it. And the pressure is ginormous. It's the highest pressure ever measured in the human body, was measured in the L5S1 disc. So when those 2 implant designs that weren't anchored to bone failed, we went with a bone anchored implant, and I just said, what is the toughest material that is still flexible that we can implant that is lifelong? There's also no healing, no appreciable healing in the disc space because the pressure is 23 atmospheres, blood can't get in. Minimum pressure in the disc is over 1.5 atmospheres. So it has no direct blood supply. It's the L5S1 disc is also the largest avascular structure without vessels in the body. And so I knew that we couldn't rely on healing or resorption. We couldn't resorb once the disc had healed. So it had to be a permanent implant that was tough as nails. Dacron is actually polyester. So if you remember the 1970s, I think it's coming back. Polyester is polyethylene terephthalate. It doesn't lyse with water. It's very durable. It doesn't generate much debris. It's non-toxic to the body. It has a very minor inflammatory reaction. So we did a lot of animal studies of Gore-Tex, which is PTFE, and Dacron. And Dacron was just better, stronger, longer lasting, less response.
yeah, listen, I mean, I don't know if the students really appreciate how big of a problem this is. And it's something that obviously has challenged a lot of people. You went over it briefly for many, many years. You know, you put a hole in this disc and you remove that herniation, but there is a lot of disc material. Even when the disc spaces are small and you think you did an aggressive discectomy, there's more, and there's a problem. There's degenerative spine disease, right? The disc is dried out, and the rest of the disc will continue to desiccate, and it reherniates in a large percent of patients. So finding a solution is kind of always, I think, plagued, neurosurgeons, scientists alike. This is a huge, huge issue in terms of most common reason people go to the ER, right? The most common reason people are out of work is low back pain and disc degeneration. And so I think I'm excited to try it. Are we going to bring it into Lennox?
That's my hope. I know the Northwell system, there's a bunch of surgeons in Northwell that are applying for approval in the hospital. So we got payment from CMS, which is great. And we're getting more and more into private insurance coverage. Just the complexities of a new medical technology. First, you have to solve a problem that needs solving. Then you got to make it work. Then you got to prove that it works. Then you got to get it regulatory approved. And then you need to convince the insurers to part with money. And of course, the surgeon needs to want to use it. So and it needs to be easy to use. It is a deeply fascinating, complicated process. Somebody asked, do you need background in entrepreneurship and business in order to solve the problem in medicine? You need a friend who has a background in entrepreneurship and business to be able to optimize the solution path, minimize the amount of money and wasted time. It does help. Just like in medicine, you want somebody with a lot of experience to do your surgery. In business, if you can work with somebody who's done it a bunch, it'll make you more successful.
So, a few people have asked already. So what do you recommend? A lot of our viewers right now are either high school, undergraduate, or even postgraduate, and they have an idea. And where do they go first? Where do they get that preliminary experience? Where do they need to go to access the people that you're talking about?
So
I guess not just medicine, but we can use that as an example. Do they start in a research laboratory, or do they initially just start the research themselves and just do it, from the comfort of their home?
I think it is important to call out medicine relative to other fields. The level of unknown in medicine, not only in anatomy, but the anatomy of pathology, the level of complexity of actually bringing a new invention to market, the regulatory complexity, the quality complexity, the manufacturing complexity, the different regulations around the world, whether it makes sense to start a clinical trial in the United States or Europe or in Australia. There's a lot of intellectual property, which is critical, patents and patent law. My strong advice to people that want to predominantly be an innovator in medicine from a company standpoint is to go into a medical device company. And if you're a physician, so that's what I did. I spent 5 years at Pfizer and at Stryker learning how medical products are brought to market and all the different components so that I could know how to hire people, to know who to hire, how to build out the organization. If you're a physician and you're innovative, one of the great things about being a physician is that you have direct visualization of the need statement on a daily basis, right? You have an opportunity to say, that doesn't work. There's a problem here. These patients don't have good outcomes. I think that the perfect combination is a physician who's been trained how to innovate, how to understand need statements, how to characterize a market size, to know what are big and important problems to found a company around, who has a strong connection with an entrepreneur who dedicates their life to bringing those things to fruition. And as a physician, my advice is always, the first thing you need to do is learn how to file a provisional patent application, right? After you've figured out this invention process of how to characterize markets and look at, which is very easy. I mean, literally you can learn it in a week. Or buy the biodesign book from Stanford. I don't get royalties. Read that, figure out how to innovate, patent it. Provisional patent applications cost like $100 and something and give you a year. Protect your IP. A lot of physicians don't. They start talking about their intellectual property to others without confidentiality. They lose patent rights in Europe immediately, and Asia and the United States. They have 1 year to patent it. That's going to go away soon. So all it takes is writing down a couple of pages about your idea and why it's good and all sorts of different ways you can implement it. And then you put that in an envelope and send it or scan it as a PDF and send it to the USPTO. And you've got a year to figure out what you're going to do with it.
That's great advice. I think I find this idea of developing a need statement very, very powerful, and I hope people take it to heart. You know, I obviously I'm a neurosurgeon. I see things every day, and I've thought, you know, all sorts of different ideas have popped into my head before, where it's like, well, wouldn't it be cool to have a robot that could do tumor surgery, right? And then it's like, oh, you know, I could do that, but that's not a need. We don't need that necessarily.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a cool idea, or trying to be innovative purposefully is different than seeing a problem that you want to fix. And do you think that kind of is a driving force, or helps you get to places better than just kind of coming up with a novel concept?
It does. People start with a solution first. PhDs in particular start because they've studied one thing really intensely, and somehow that's the solution to everything. After that, my joke about, and I went to MIT, interviewing MIT students, was you gave them a simple problem like hitting the distal hole on a tibial nail, which is a nail that goes under the inside of the bone, and then you have to put a cross screw, and you got to find this hole that's hidden inside this bone. And MIT students always had swirling lasers at some point, right? And the reality is, in the end, you want to find the simplest solution to address the actual problem that you're seeing. A robot to do brain surgery. Well, why? That's actually a solution. It's not a need statement. And it's a solution to what? You don't know. Exactly. What is it that this robot has to be good at? What is it that you can't do without it, that it is enabling you to do? What is the problem, right? Give me the patient indication. Give me the region of the brain you got to get to. Give me those are the things that allow you to brainstorm the actual solution. The robot might be the answer, but it may not be. Characterizing the problem is the first step. Somebody actually asked, how do you analyze risk associated with a potential product once you write down the need statement without actually constructing the product? I got to tell you, when you have a good, well-characterized need statement without a solution, haven't brainstormed everything, you can actually calculate what it's worth. And you can write the clinical trial without even knowing what the product is. Because say reducing reoperations following lumbar discectomy. Well, I know what a reoperation costs. I know what the rate of reoperations is. So the value of having a product that reduced or eliminated would be related to the percentage of reduction in reoperation and the amount of money that each reoperation costs. I don't even know what my solution is yet. I wrote the clinical trial for Barricaid before I had the solution, right? Because we knew the two patients, we're going to randomize 1-to-1. We knew what the endpoints were. We knew roughly how long we had to go. Can you analyze risk? I don't know that you can analyze risk, but you can write down the acceptable level of risk, right? You can interview surgeons and talk to them and say, so if you had a product that closed holes in the annulus, what would you not want it to do? Right? What could it never do? And I'll tell you what it is. It's, cause more problems than a recurrent disc herniation.
Yep, that's it.
Ever.
Yeah, 100%. Someone asked actually, I think, a very practical question, which is, when you were working on your first invention, how were you able to fund it? And this is obviously a different answer to different people, but I think it's nice when people explain their own pathways to things.
How to be able to fund it. Money is important. And so I've got a presentation that I should email to you guys. It's a 5-minute presentation on how to raise money. I've raised about $250 million in my life, maybe a little bit more, for the different companies that I have. My very first funder was Pfizer. So I had a budget of $1 million a year when I was 23, and they let me do what I wanted to do. And that budget went up as time went on. That's great, because you can learn and make mistakes on a big company's dime. And ultimately I paid them back, but it was great to learn using that. Since then, I've raised money from the two most common sources, venture capitalists and private individuals. And so in medicine, there are very well-known pathways to raise cash. It's a well-structured industry. And there are a lot of venture capitalists that are happy to invest in early stage medical ideas. You want to have a patent application, a functioning prototype, probably an animal lab that you've done, or showing that it works in a cadaver, and you can go raise cash. And you sell a percentage of your business for the money that you raise. The same is true with individuals. The advantage of a venture capital firm is they have more money to invest later. Individuals tend not to. Friends and family are great for a consumer product company where there isn't venture capital available. So everybody expects, like with restaurants, that you're gonna make your product based on friends and family, launch it, make enough money to expand. I actually did raise from private individuals. Surgeons invested in Coravin, my wine company, and were my initial investors. So my advice on raising money is find a venture capitalist, find somebody who knows them, have that person introduce you to them, and you can raise money. Do not send them a business plan. Do not send them a cold mail or call their offices. That never works. You need to be introduced. Same is true with private families.
Absolutely. I got another very important question here. Does Coravin work on champagne?
Aha. Not yet. So perhaps in the room over there, I'm in Coravin's office right now. In the room over there, there may be a Coravin that works on champagne. May or may not be. So when I founded the company, I had that need statement, a way to drink any wine from any bottle I want, whenever I want, without having to think about when I'm going to drink from it again. Independent of closure, still or sparkling, faster, easier, and more fun than opening the bottle. Kind of a mouthful, but that's without even solving the problem yet. That was the statement. I said, this is what this company is going to do. So we now work with screw caps, and we've got a product that's going to work with every closure and still wine. And sparkling will launch next year, first quarter, second quarter. Yeah. Is
this your full-time thing now, or are you you're splitting time?
I'm 50-50, and as my wife said, 0% at home. So I love both companies. There was a Dutch surgeon who told me, you work in medicine to keep us alive, and you work on wine to give us a reason to stay alive. And I sort of like that combination. Wine is quality of life, and I don't think I could ever leave medicine. It's so fulfilling. I mean, there are bad days when something goes wrong and you're like, screw this, what am I doing? I mean, you never heard it. The worst thing that ever happens with Coravin is a bottle of wine goes bad. In medicine, especially when I was working in cardiac valves and pediatrics, right? I mean, there are bad days, but they're great days, right? And you think about life extension. So if you can positively influence the trajectory of somebody's life when they're 41, they got another 40 years that are better for them rather than worse. And pediatrics and those guys save the most life.
I have one question I wanted to ask you in this forum is obviously there's the micro and the macro. Like when you develop a device, you save a lot of people. Yet it was driven by your desire to help your mom. And so sometimes when you're in the device business, you have to it's like being it's like designing a vaccine. You're having a much greater impact, but you're not feeling it every day. We, as surgeons, we get to take care of a patient. We have an experience. It's a one-off. Is that something that you feel like you miss, that wasn't really your skill set, that you wish you had, that you are aware but doesn't bother you? Where does that fit into your brain?
It's funny. That's probably the most important emotional component that I don't see every day, and that I am envious of. I thought very hard about becoming a surgeon, and in the end, I was thinking, what is my goal? My goal is to positively influence as many people's lives as I can while I'm alive. And my strengths are the creation of useful things. So I thought, if I can make something, there's a hip prosthesis I designed for Japan that, has been put into hundreds of thousands of people and dramatically decreases dislocation in patients with a congenital dysplasia of the hip or a malformation of their hip. So we took a 10% problem, made it 1 out of 1,000. And there's hundreds of thousands of those been put in. And I get sort of a macro warm and fuzzy from that. The micro, I try really hard to be involved in our clinical trials so that I see patients that are 1 year out, 2 years out, because I do miss that a lot. I told my kids that your job in high school and college and your first jobs is to find the intersection between that which you're good at and that which you're passionate about. And if you can work where those two things cross, it's not work. And so
kind of like the flow channel, where your skills match the effort, or the difficulty matches your skills. you have to know what your skills are, and you have to know what makes you happy. And if you don't, then you're out of luck, basically. Because if something's too difficult for your skills and you're anxious, if your skills are too great or your passion is too great for what your demands are, it's boring.
Yeah.
And constantly sort of, managing that, I think, for sure. I mean, a lot of doctors, me included, over time, especially as you take on some leadership roles, you're sort of required to give up some of the things that you like to do, because I'm not the only one that can do the vast majorities of the surgeries that I do. And in order to give that up, you have to give up some of those things you like to do. And sometimes you don't even like to do them that much. It's sort of routine in order to have greater impact and do more creative things. I think that's part of the progression. That's why a lot of people become entrepreneurial in medicine, because they find this other part of their brain. So.
Yeah, I absolutely think so. It's career choice is such an important decision. I've had 3, and so it's also not a permanent one necessarily. I always feel like it's important to have a mission, right? And if you find a mission that you're passionate about, find a place within the delivery of that mission that your talent makes you a good contributor. I very much think, as a secular humanist, how do we make everything better for as many people as possible? Somebody asked, how did college help prepare me for this career? MIT just taught me how to think in a structured way very quickly. That's what it did. And the basic mechanics and electrical, I saw argon there. And so you're exposed to a lot of bright people, a lot of good science, sort of state of the art. You get a good grounding in technology and the way to analyze a problem. Right? That's what college does. I was convinced that I was going to solve energy through fusion when I was at MIT. That's why I went there. And fusion is still 30 years away. And I got out of that. I got out of Dodge after working in it for a year and a half, and I realized, oh my God, this is never going to happen. So the real reason I went to MIT is not what it gave me, and it was just the ability to think. Plus the people that went to school. I feel terrible for you guys that are not in college with your fellow classmates around you. You get a lot from them, and they remain friends the rest of your life.
Yeah, I agree with you. I totally agree. So we have 3 minutes left. Some people were asking about books. I just threw 3 books up there that have really impacted me. That's just 3 for now. Josh asked me for another list. If you have any, if you'd like to send us, Greg, that'd be great. The 3 that have affected me the most are 3 books. One is called Ego is the Enemy, which I've already talked about. The other is called Why Buddhism is True. It's a non-religious book, both about Buddhism. And the last one is Everybody Lies. It's a book about data and written by a Google engineer who looked at real searching and comparing what people search for on Google versus what they write on social media. The best story is that when you search what women search about their husbands on social media, it's my husband is great, my husband is awesome, my husband is terrific. But on Google, they search my husband is beating me, my husband, so there's this huge discrepancy between the public facing and what we think in private. And that's why Google really is the Rorschach test of our world. So Greg, were there any, the last couple minutes, any recommendations for things that this group could read that has impacted you in a way that you'd recommend?
2 real quick ones. Thinking Fast and Slow is a book about the difference between your gut reaction and actually sitting there and analyzing a problem. And it actually goes through what are the odds that each of them are right. And as it turns out, thinking through a problem is much better than gut reaction, as it turns out. So that was hard for me because I thought I had a very good gut reaction, but it's changed the way that I think. Measure What Matters is another one. A lot of people measure things because they were told to measure them and because that's what other people measure in their daily activities or in their businesses or in their work. Think real hard about what it is that you're tracking from the beginning. It's really true in clinical trials. There's no way to go back and get data. Once that follow-up has happened, you ain't getting it again if you didn't ask for it. So measuring what matters, thinking about what matters right from the beginning, and then keeping track of it is more and more important as more and more data becomes available in our world. I'll think of a 3rd one to send out.
This was great. I'm sorry I missed the portion of it, but I knew you'd be insightful and passionate. And that was obvious when we met. You know, have a guy who's at this point in your career, obviously so excited about what you do is where we all want to be and where everyone should strive for. That's a credit to you and your choices and the things you're doing. And you've obviously already done incredible work. And I look forward to working with you and your team down the road. And thanks for on short notice picking up on this. It's a great opportunity this summer to do something cool. So thank you.
Yeah, it's a great program. Thank you so much for making me a part of it. I really appreciate it. And you guys are spending your time well during COVID-19 summer. I really appreciate the chance to sort of mouth off about something that I love. So if any of you guys want to be an entrepreneur, I'm on LinkedIn.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. And we got to play with we got to mess around with the disc. You got to get it over.
Yeah, I'll be back down next Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
I did one yesterday. I was staring at the annulotomy, wondering what the hell I was going to do. Now
I'm trying to get in your head.
Yeah. All right. Take care, guys.
Great. Thank you all.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Greg.